He lost his friends, his car, his job and nearly lost an eye. I've been putting this off, but this is really the only nuclear revenge I've ever dealt out in my life. A little history about where I was at before all of this. I had a very rocky relationship with my father and my mom had just kicked me out at 19 with nowhere to go. My dad actually stepped up and helped me for the first time in my life by getting me into an apartment in my podunk little hometown in South Idaho. I was hanging out with the wrong crowd and started going to parties and doing the things I missed out on doing with friends in high school. I was a goody two shoes up to that point, and a late bloomer who wasn't used to getting male's attention, meaning I was a virgin. I started hanging out at the park playing horseshoes and letting my friends get me absolutely trashed when I met a cowboy called Slick. I didn't have much of an interest in him other than just talking about old western movies. I'm a huge movie buff, and actors from the silver screen of classic 1950s movies. Slick and I both worked for the same company, as did 98% of the small town we lived in, so we knew each other in passing. He started coming in to get horse meds and other vet supplies and always asked me to wait on him. Okay, whatever, that was my job. One of our mutual friends invited me to a bonfire at their house, which was right across from where Slick was staying in a bunkhouse. I went not even expecting to see Slick there and had actually taken one of my best friends with me to keep an eye out for me because I've never been a trusting person due to past traumas as a kid. A few hours pass. We're all drinking and Slick keeps putting his arm around me and trying to dominate whatever conversation I'm having with my friends, especially around my guy friends. I'm tipsy and not really caring about it too much and go off with a few of my girlfriends in a group where we're gossiping and talking. A couple hours pass by and my friend I drove up to the party with took off with another friend for a beer run. They never came back to the party. The party is winding down. I don't feel comfortable driving home with any form of alcohol in my system and Slick says he has a spare cot in his room I can have. I didn't feel comfortable going, but my other friends assured me Slick was trustworthy. We got to his room. There was no cot. Slick says he'll sleep on the floor and we can watch Blazing Saddles because he'd heard it was one of my favorites. I said fine, and crawled into his bed fully clothed. Sand shoes. Well, I'm sure you can guess what happened, so I'm not going to delve into the very unpleasant details. I didn't sleep the whole night. I just laid in the bed in disbelief that what had happened actually happened. Once I knew he was asleep, I snuck out of his room and drove home, sobered by the experience. I don't know how long I sat in the shower, but the water ran cold and I called out sick from work for 2 days. Over the next few days I had bruises that covered my entire body. I had bite marks and scratches, and fingertip bruises everywhere. I had also developed one of the worst UTIs I've ever experienced in my life and called the town clinic for an examination to make sure everything was okay, and declined to report it because the cops in my very small and rural town always sided with the men when women I knew reported their assaults. Slick became an awful force in my life. When he wasn't bothering me at work, he was leaving dead rattlesnakes on my doorstep and telling all of our mutual friends and acquaintances how he put another notch in his belt. And pretty soon after, all of his buddies stopped hanging around him when they realized he was a piece of crap. The revenge. My dad is a 6'8" giant Cossack Russian. He worked as a machinist for many years, making his already big hands thick and calloused, important for later. He's a very intimidating man and has a violent streak. Because I was on bad terms with my mom, I turned to him, fully trusting him as someone I could confide in. His wife had to take pictures of my bruises for my doctor's file. I don't know why the doctor didn't take them herself. She told me to bring them in for the file on my health to go with the assault report. My dad was livid, but he pushed his fury deep down and waited for later. Slick drove a really crappy Oldsmobile. He also liked to go out drinking every day after work. A few of my friends had been filled in as to what Slick did, and thus the rest of the town knew, as news spreads like the plague in tiny towns. Slick's crappy car mysteriously caught on fire outside of the busy bar, yet nobody seen anything regarding how it started. 2 weeks after his car burned up, my hometown had its annual birthday celebration. My dad goes to it every year and catches up with friends he hasn't seen in a long time. This means also visiting the town's bar. This is what my dad ended up telling me after everything happened. He walked in, said hello to the owner and demanded to know where the one called Slick was. The bar owner begged him not to make a huge scene and to just keep things civil since he knew what my dad was there for. He told my dad that Slick was playing poker on the deck out back and my dad went out looking for him. He found Slick and asked him if Slick knew who he was. Slick was disrespectful and said he didn't give a care who he was. He was busy playing poker with his friends, who weren't really friends, but guys who knew my dad and just watched everything happen. Strike 1. My dad told him he was blank's dad, and he needed to talk to him about respecting young women. Slick said there wasn't anything about me to respect. Strike 2. My dad tells Slick to get his ass out of the chair and speak to him like a man. Slick tells my dad to pee off. Strike 3. My dad picked up Slick, who is 5 feet 4 and at the time was 180-ish pounds, by his collar and stuck his thumb into Slick's right eye socket. My dad said he had never heard a grown man scream like a woman before then and all he could do was smile about it. He dropped Slick on the ground and walked out of the bar. My dad was afraid the cops were going to be coming for him, so he found me at the concession stand I was working at to tell me everything that had happened before he left back for home. Nobody called the cops. The following week, the bosses at the company caught wind of what Slick had done to me, and had already had an investigation open against him because they had noticed some very expensive horseshoeing tools had gone missing, with him being the only person around at the time. I should add that the company, though very large, was a tight-knit family-oriented business in this small town. Both of my parents worked there and the bosses had known me since I was knee-high. They were very upset and ended up firing him and gave him 12 hours to vacate the company premises, including the bunkhouse. I only saw Slick in person once more about a month later and his eye was still black. I had a panic attack when I seen him, so I didn't stick around long for howdy doos. And that's my nuclear revenge story. It's long and a bit painful to remember, but I'm still healing and moving on from it 10 years later. My life has gotten better and I know his life is miserable and that makes me happy. TLDR. Assaulter had his car set on fire, got a thick Russian thumb stuck in his eye socket, lost his job and got chased out of town.